family members who lost their loved ones. In Mission Control, they stood at rapt attention for the President as he addressed the nation and addressed them. They, too, feeling the loss there as we look at the scene there at Mission Control. Judy Woodruff, it's a difficult thing for a president to address a nation at this moment, isn't it?
It certainly is. And Miles, you know, right now, coming in the midst of the crisis the United States faces, the decision the President faces with regard to whether to go to war with Iraq, this was the last thing.
Columbia, Houston, we see your tire pressure messages, and we do not copy your last. Columbia, Roger, last transmission. Recapping quickly now for those of you who may have just joined us, and to keep you up to date on tomorrow's headlines, President Bush has just spoken about the loss of the Space Shuttle Columbia and the 7-member crew. He said the astronauts assumed great risk in the name of humanity, and that the cause in which they died will continue. NASA says the orbiter was destroyed, and it, quote, does not appear, unquote, that there are any survivors. NASA Administrator Sean O'Keefe says it's a sad day for the astronauts' families and for the nation. Sean O'Keefe said there's no indication that this was caused by anything or anyone on the ground, no indication anywhere of a bomb aboard. He said that the loss of this, and I quote, valiant crew is something the families and the nation will never be able to get over. Mission Control lost contact with the shuttle just minutes before it was to land this morning at 9:16 Eastern Time at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. It was over North Texas, headed to land just a few minutes later at the tremendous speed at which it was traveling. It would have taken only a few minutes to get there. CBS News has amateur video, quite a lot of it. We're showing you 2 of the scenes that we have. This one taken from Central Texas at Waco, Texas. We have another taken from North Texas, both of which are explicit in their detail of what happened to the shuttle. CBS News space consultant Bill Harwood says sources tell him that the problem could, that's a quote, could, and italicized it, could have been some massive structural failure in the shuttle's left wing. At the very least, it is a fact that in the initial, very initial stages of the investigation, there's some concentration on what may have happened with the left wing. There are reports that debris has been found in 5 states. You're looking at some of it now. A lot of debris over southeast Texas, in and around Nacogdoches and Corsicana. There were 7 astronauts aboard, including 6 Americans, along with the first Israeli astronaut. And partly because of the Israeli astronaut's presence, security surrounding the mission had been tight for takeoff and at times when the shuttle was at lower altitudes. This morning it was at a tremendously high altitude, 200,000 feet plus, and it's being emphasized that no weapon from the ground that could have been in the hands of terrorists or others could have reached it at that height. The Columbia had been on a 2-week science mission, which until today had been deemed a success because virtually every experiment worked. And the orbiter was at an altitude of 200,000 feet plus. It was traveling at 12,500 miles an hour when contact was lost, and these amateur photographs began to be taken. Russ Mitchell?
The initial hope, as we sat here at 9 o'clock this morning Eastern Time when we first heard that Mission Control had lost contact with the shuttle, was that this was just an intermittent thing, that this contact would be established very shortly, which we understand is not uncommon when the shuttle comes in to the atmosphere. However, when we talked to Bill Harwood at about 9:14 Eastern Time, the shuttle was scheduled to land at 9:16. It was clear that something was wrong after 15 minutes of hearing no contact from the shuttle. And at that point, Mission Control came on and said, we need to go into emergency procedures, we need to go into our contingency plan because something is definitely wrong. And Bill Harwood told us very early there is no way for the shuttle, when it's coming down, it's basically gliding. It's a floating brick, as Bill Harwood said. At that point, we knew that something was wrong, something tragic. And unfortunately, it has now been officially declared, and we move on.
Indeed we do, but not before contemplating the words of the late President John F. Kennedy when he committed the United States to reaching the moon. He did it in the early 1960s. It was achieved in 1969. Quote President John F. Kennedy in 1962 as he committed the United States to reaching the moon and to be the first to reach the moon. quote, "The United States was not built by those who waited and rested and wished to look behind them. This country was conquered by those who moved forward, and so will space be conquered." Dateline Baghdad. Immediate popular reaction in Baghdad, the Iraqi capital today, to the loss of the U.S. Space Shuttle Columbia and its 7-member crew, including the first Israeli in space, was that it was, and I quote now the Reuters news agency, some Iraqis on the street saying it was, quote, "God's retribution on Americans." A government employee is quoted as saying, "We're happy that it broke up." Another government employee is quoted as saying, "God wants to show that his might is greater than the Americans. They have encroached on our country. God is avenging us," and so forth. That among the reaction with the Iraqis, where, of course, feelings run very strong with, and
or spiritual aspect as well, which has been a very interesting thing for me.
Rick Husband, as he referred to there, a devout Christian, learning a little bit about Judaism through the eyes of Ilan Ramon. Ilan Ramon and his crewmate on this mission, which was oft delayed, series of problems with the shuttle and scheduling issues. Other missions took priority to the International Space Station. This mission finally taking off some 16 days ago and going up until that point at 9 a.m. Eastern time this morning, up until that point, nearly flawlessly for the 7-person crew as they conducted a series of experiments, some 80 experiments in all, over the course of this 16-day mission. NASA is in the early stages of its investigation already. As you look at this tape from WFAA, shot from Dallas, you can see what happens. What seems like a single streaky meteor quickly becomes 3, 4, 5 meteors as the Space Shuttle Columbia breaks up in midair, traveling 18 times the speed of sound at an altitude of some 40 miles above us. And that picture tells you what happened, but offers up many, many questions to us at this hour as to what could have happened, what might have caused it. A whole series of things will be discussed and looked at. And as one of the people we talked to earlier mentioned, an engineer who was involved in the Challenger investigation, no one in the early stages of Challenger could have anticipated that it came down to a rubber O-ring that was too brittle and thus allowed hot gases to spill from those solid rocket boosters on the side of the space shuttle, spill into the external tank and cause an explosion in there. That's ultimately what happened. At the initial stages after Challenger, they were looking at the main engines and something there. So it took some time for them to come up with that whole scenario. Eventually it was found, eventually it was fixed, and eventually they flew. It took the better part, two years, almost really 3 years, before the return to flight of the Space Shuttle Discovery. And that is probably the kind of time frame that we're going to be talking about here as the NASA and the country endeavors to find out precisely what happened to the Space Shuttle Columbia before any other shuttle leaves the launch pad at the Kennedy Space Center. Let's get a recap now from Darren in the newsroom. Darren?
All right, Miles, we're going to do a couple things here. We're going to do that recap, and we're also going to talk to some of the people who saw the shuttle or some of the debris coming down. First, a recap of today's tragic events, beginning with Space Shuttle Columbia making its descent to Earth. It broke up over Texas this morning. It was planned to land at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. When you look at the video, you can see fiery pieces falling from the shuttle. This is very much like the video that Miles was just showing you. As we're also watching from NASA, NASA lost contact with the shuttle around 9 a.m. Eastern. The shuttle, as you're watching it, was about 200,000 feet and traveling at speeds of 12,000 miles per hour when contact was lost. Government officials say terrorism is not suspected. The shuttle was simply too far away from Earth for that to take place. Debris from the shuttle rained down over east central Texas, and it goes all the way into Louisiana. Officials are warning that the debris could be hazardous and should be avoided, and they are certainly urging residents who find debris to immediately contact authorities. Do not go near it. Do not touch it. Of course, we cannot forget the astronauts who lost their lives. 7 crew members aboard the shuttle were killed. NASA says their families at this point in time are definitely getting support.
Right,
have to say the families are bearing up with an incredible amount of dignity considering their loss. We all grieve for them. We all pray with them.